we're obviously going to be talking about brand storytelling this morning. We have an esteemed panel of guests with us. So I will just quickly introduce everybody. First of all, we have RANKIN, photographer, filmmaker, founder of Hunger and co-founder of Dazed and Confused. We have JONAS, award-winning filmmaker. And we have RONOJOY, whose title is...
Group Creative Director.
Okay, Group Creative Director of Dazed Media.
I've done two little films. One film describes the other film, so watch the first film, the description, and then if you want to watch the other film, we'll show it. And it's about a brand that I work with called Coco de Mer, and it's about kind of creating a film that we did with them, which was made by 6 directors, so it was the first collaborative film that I'd ever made. Well, the objective for me was to create Instagram on cocaine, basically, because I feel that the way that we consume imagery these days is so fast and so kind of scary, especially if you're a photographer or a filmmaker.
How do you come up with the kind of creative idea behind those?
For music videos?
For music videos, yeah. What's the kind of process for you? I mean, what do you take your inspiration from?
Well, for starters, I'm by myself. On advertising, I have a group of people that spend a year figuring out the 30-second spot that I'm supposed to shoot.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference. But I try to, with my commercial background, I try to be as professional as I can and try to figure out what the specific timing and artist is about at that moment. You know, it's never an ego trip. It's never what I think it's good for me or what I think is cool at the moment. It's always what I believe is the right thing for the artist at the moment.
In there as well, we saw a couple of clips of the film that you made with Duran Duran. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? I mean, there was the shot in there with Naomi.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that happens a lot now the last few years is it started as product placement, where we usually get thrown a product like on the day of the shoot, you know. Mm-hmm. We all seen those Beats headphones.
We have indeed, yes.
We all seen those cars and the smartphones.
So in regards to something like that, I mean, just quickly, sort of what's the process, what are the relationships between each of the different brands and yourself? How do you kind of keep everybody happy?
Well, I mean, that was basically like having 4 different clients.
Yeah.
Luckily, Duran Duran is the kind of band that liked it, and they were really generous with their time, and they actually went all down to Switzerland and went to some party, and they performed. It was like, so when you have an artist like that, it makes it much easier.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask yourself, how would you define brand storytelling? How would you define kind of branded content?
I think that branded content, it's like a mix between advertising and kind of explanation, because the branded content has to be interesting to the people watching it,
to the audience,
and
yeah.
If it isn't, you know, if you're not making something that people want to watch and want to share, that in this space now today, you can't have that 30-second commercial. You can't have that definitive moment where they've got nothing else to watch and they just watch that. You have to do something that's interesting.
I think I would add to that it's almost like you have to get rid of the brand word in that phrase. It's just about storytelling, and there's a difference between pushing a product and advertising to creating stories. So it's the same process. Like, what are the themes? What are the things that you're trying to bring to life? There's that great sort of Dennis Hopper quote, you know, audiences don't want to be audiences, they want experiences. And I think that's very true to the idea of brand storytelling.
It has to be something that's interesting to people that are going to watch it, whatever brand it is.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people, I guess, talk about integrity and authenticity when it comes to that kind of content. Do you think that is really important, or is it about how you kind of package it and push that onto the audience? Do you think the audience do actually differentiate?
I think there's an element of transparency that's important. I think people are going to see through it. It's about the way that you include and shoot that. So, you know, I mean, Jonas will be able to kind of explain more, but with that Supermodels video, it seemed like there was a great film that came out of it at the end, you know, whether there was Swarovski diamonds or otherwise, you know, people are going to understand that. If you're trying to be sly about it, then I think that becomes, you know, you're kind of calling yourself out.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would classify as being sly in your opinion?
Well, product placement.
Yeah.
I think we've all seen a lot of the Bond films where there's
Yeah.
that pause and the moment where, are you wearing a Rolex? No, I'm wearing an Omega. And, you know, it's like sort of really hackneyed rather than him just wearing a really like great Rolex throughout the film. You know, so I think it's when you labour a point too much that it becomes a bit like the woman doth protest too much. So.
Do you think it's important, I mean, to all of you, do you think it's important to maintain some sort of integrity to what the brand represents themselves, or do you think that you can create a piece of content that just kind of features them but tells a different story?
Well, I always think about the brand a lot, and I always put that in the first room because that's in advertising, of course, but also in music videos. I always saw music videos as commercials. That was my approach from the beginning. Now we don't sell albums anymore, so there's not really anything to sell anymore, but we still try to approach them as brands and try to, you know. And my job was never to change a brand or to tell them how to do it. My job was always to figure out what it is they really say, because they usually, like Rankin say, they think they know everything, but the truth is that you got to translate and filter what they say and try to make that into reality, you know. So it's a lot about how you take feedback and how you take in what they actually, the brief that they give you it's not really translates well into reality. So that's kind of like where I see myself in the middle of all that.
Slightly off topic, but I mean, just going back to what you were saying about not selling albums, has that changed the way that you approach a brief for a music video?
Yeah, well, I'm a fucking dinosaur in music videos. So I was there when it started, and I was there when it was creative and fun, and you can do anything you want. And I was there when MTV dictated everything and censorship killed it all, and I was there when it completely died, and I was there when Gaga brought it up to internet level and made it fun again. And now we rate it with hits on YouTube. I have about 3 billion hits on YouTube, which is a good, it's a good one, but I haven't made 1 cent out of it, so it depends on how you see it.
Maybe
you
not
know?
so much.
So it depends on how you see it, but so I kind of been there, you know, I'm probably the only one that still is hanging in there and still think it's fun to
You're the
do
best,
music.
though.
Well, I got nothing else to do, but I still look for that one thing that makes it. I always look for that one reason why I should do it again, and I always say that every video I do now is the last one I do, and then I do another one.
What do you think the relationship is between the creative, between the brand, and between the platform that you're actually aiming to produce for? I mean, Rankin with X, did you have an idea of where it was going to go beforehand?
Yeah, we knew it was going to live on YouTube, so so we knew that we had to, you know, have as little actual overt sex in there.
Yeah.
So it was that fine line, because they do take it down. So, you know, for us, it's like 2.5 minutes seemed like a really great amount of time for a sexual experience. You know, so
sounds like most of mine, to be honest.
yeah. So, you know, but most brands really hate you doing something that's more than a minute. Which it never makes sense to me. If it's good and if it's, you know, it's something that you're interested in, and we definitely didn't think everybody would like X. We knew it was going to be Marmite, you know, for a lot of people. But you take that risk, and you know that's what's exciting. You can't. I mean, I totally agree with Jonas. You have to work. You have to collaborate with the brand.
Yeah.
But sometimes the best things they can do is just give it all to you and say, you know, do the best, because you know we are supposed to be the experts at it.
What do you think are the parameters that makes something successful? Not what are the parameters that kind of, you know, the creative parameters, but the relationship between, for example, yourself and the band or the brand, and then, you know, whoever else is kind of involved. How does that work in order to kind of make something happen, to make it successful?
I mean, that's if we all knew that, we would, you know, all be very happy. I have no idea, but to me personally, projects could have success on different levels. You know, a happy client is a success for me, you know, and a lot of sales is a success, you know, and you know, shaking hands and being friend at the end of it could be a success. You know, it's to me all kinds of different levels of success every time we do it.
Okay. And Rankin?
Exactly the same. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to know sometimes if people are even happy with the job you've done.
The client?
Yeah, it's very strange. Sometimes you walk away and you go, because they're so used to kind of being nice to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's like, sorry to interrupt.
That's
okay. In advertising, by the time the stuff is out, I'm so far off, so I never really hear how it works. I never really know if my stuff works. Nobody ever tells me. There's no follow-up. There's not like an email like a year later saying that, oh, it worked.
Especially with music videos.
Well, music videos now we at least have YouTube, so we can see if people like it, and we can read about it if we want to spend time on that, and we can see.
The people are very bad at saying thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I find.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
They never say thank. They go. You never get an email going, "Oh, thanks, that's brilliant."
Right.
Well, we can thank you now for all the stuff you've
Thank
done.
you. No, I thank you.
I think we should give everyone a round of applause.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's really weird. It's quite rude, I think.
I'd say in the process, however, trust and instinct are really paramount, especially on kind of projects that have been successful for me, in that without a level of trust, you just end up in this kind of horrible kind of vicious circle where no one's ever going to be happy. And similarly with instincts, you know, if you're constantly just questioning and not sure, then things, you know, you can end up on certain projects, you know, 2 years down the line and no one's still kind of made the decision on it. So I definitely think in the within the process part, trust and instinct, I think,
Instinct
are paramount.
really important.
Yeah.
Usually when they call again, you know it worked.
Yeah. That's true.
So trust and instinct, I mean, how do you kind of gauge that? Do you just really, I mean, is there any way of sort of saying, okay, this is the right thing to do, or do you just have to literally kind of...
It's your gut. It's like what your gut's telling you. If you think that it's wrong, that's what I meant about the honesty thing. It's like sometimes you'll be quite far down the road in a project and you'll just go, this is not right, there's something wrong. And it's your job, in a way, to be the person that goes, I don't think this is right. And it's very hard to do that, especially in a room, especially if you're working with an agency, because they have account handlers or, you know, people that deal with the client, and they absolutely hate you telling the truth. But it is important to do that.
RONOJOY, what happens when somebody brings something back that you don't like?
It depends who's bringing it back, doesn't it? I think you have to understand why you don't like it.
Yeah.
And whether and on that basis, I think it's kind of working with that kind of person to kind of develop it. If you think it's because they're not necessarily like fulfilling their potential, or it's totally kind of off the original kind of concept, then there is a reason, as opposed to just I don't like it.
Yeah.
So I think it's always ensuring that there's a collaborative process in that, rather than just dismissive. And I think, you know, I've been on the receiving end of that as well, and I think that goes back to my point about trust. Like, as a client, you know, when I've been on the client side, or if I've been presenting something to a client, there needs to be a kind of a solid reason and a constructive one of where you go beyond that, as opposed to a client just saying, I don't like it, do it again or do it different.
The bigger reactions, the better, you know. And usually, if it's hated, it's more loved on the other side. So, you know,
You want people to feel passionate about it.
Yeah.
Because if there's a bit of passion, whether it's hate or love, then you know that something's touched a nerve.
the worst part is if nobody feels anything. Then it's nothing.
Yeah.
We've all had those, you know.
Really? I haven't.
I set you up there. Come on.
And I think especially in branding content, going back to what I was saying about trust, you know, you can often end up with dialogues with clients where it becomes creative by committee, and what you end up with is something very kind of lukewarm and tepid, because you've got, you know, 20 people's different opinions.
I mean, I know Vice recently have kind of been talking about feeding some of their content onto television, which to me, you know, the idea of a piece of television being or a film in that sense being kind of native or branded content really blurs the line. I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Do you think it's a positive thing, a negative thing? Do you think it?
I think if the stuff they're showing is good, then that's a great thing.
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean about audiences. No, but
do people really like advertising?
Well,
I don't think people like it. I don't think people go, oh yeah, They might see a couple of good ads and go, yeah, that, but they don't necessarily want to be sold to.
Yeah.
So, this new way of presenting stuff that's maybe a bit more interesting and trying to capture their imaginations and makes them think, oh yeah, I'll have a bit of that. I think personally, I prefer that than, unless it's a really great ad by Jonathan Glazer or something. It's most of the time you just forward through ads and you click you skip on YouTube immediately. You don't want to watch it. So I think the more interesting the content can be, the more interesting it is for the consumer or the viewer. But let's ask Jonas more questions about him because he's really interested. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so from your perspective, Jonas, would you consider creating a piece of film that the brand was involved in much more intrinsically? So, I mean, would you consider creating something for TV that kind of the brand were funding and that had that alignment going through it?
I mean, sure. I mean, as long as it gets made and there's some sort of integrity in there, yeah, sure. Why not? I kind of like that when, for me, working mostly in entertainment, when the line between entertainment and advertising is kind of like disappeared, it opened up a lot of new, doors. So I don't mind it. And I don't really see the difference now between TV and movies and what we do. And it's kind of like a blur, which is creative.
Do you think anybody does?
I think so. I don't know. You mean the audience?
Yeah, yeah.
I think the younger generation doesn't really care if what we call it. I think we still do because at least I am. Most people in here are young, but I'm very traditional and I'm not very active on social media at all and like all those things. So I see myself as an old guy that's going to disappear. But I do creatively. For me, it's a fun time to be able to do that. And
would you make a branded feature film?
Sure. Well, I mean, my movies are because I do a lot of advertising. It buys me the freedom of not give a shit when I do my movies. So I'm drawn to these really small, independent, dark movies. So I'm trying to stick with that. It's a plan I have to kind of like finance my life with other stuff so I can do my movies. But yeah, I don't have anything against it. No.
So would you do like a big blockbuster if you were offered it?
Probably no. But again, it depends on what it is. But I wouldn't spend a few years on that. No.
Does that come down to creative freedom or?
Yeah. Well, I mean. It's probably the material out there. I don't know. I like big movies too, and I like to go and see them. But I wouldn't even know where to start to do one of those. So I'm not sure. I wouldn't know.
I would never be offered one, but I would.
No, I'm not sure I would either. Though.
I would never.
There was a time in especially in Los Angeles when you as a music video could basically take a job from Steven Spielberg. Hollywood always looked for what the flavor of the month is. And there was a time when music videos directed, and a lot of them did. Some of them are more successful than others. Michael Bay and David Fincher and all those guys. They made a big career out of it. But most of them, did that one big blockbuster movie and never did anything else.
Are we going to get to a place where there is no line between
Hopefully.
what is branded and unbranded content?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
From your perspective as well, RONOJOY?
I mean, this goes back to Rankin's point, I think. Interruptive advertising is just boring. No one wants it. So you just want great, just great creative all around. And I think that can be anything. I don't think it's going to be kind of markedly different. You just want to see better stuff and more of it.